Okay, welcome everyone. For those of you who are here for an adult education session here for the first time, so my name is Velly, and I run all the shiurim and adult education classes and workshops and courses that we run during the year. Someone today, I was delivering matzah today, and someone asked me, what's the purpose? Why am I running this session? And it's really comes down to two reasons. Number one, I think we tell our own kids that fail to prepare to fail. So something as big as a Seder that happens once and twice a year, it should be something that we're preparing for. We prepare for meetings, we prepare for presentations, we prepare for times our families get together. So much work is being put into the food and the cooking, but why aren't we preparing for what makes a Seder more than just another family dinner? That's number one. Anytime we experience something big in life, we prepare for it. So we should be preparing for a Seder. Number two is just recently speaking to people, you would expect to hear feedback from the Seder. There's a lot of kvetching and a lot of oiveng and a lot of challenges people are having, whether it's the basic challenge of guests coming and complaining that they're hungry from the moment they walk in, or whether it's difficulties getting the teenagers involved, difficulties getting the adults involved, people not taking the Seder seriously. So that's a bit of the motivation behind today's session. And I've been lucky in my life to spend Seders in some amazing places in the world. And those Seders are, the best memories of my life. I had a Seder in Moscow, in Hungary, in San Francisco, Ocean City, Maryland, in New York. And they're the best Seder, they're the best memories of my life. So what I'd like to do is share some of that experience with you guys today. And really, my goal, I don't know if every game or suggestion that I'll give today is going to be practical for your personal family Seder, for your personal unique situation, but at least I hope you'll walk out tonight thinking a bit differently about how you're going to approach the Seder and to try to do things a bit different, which might take your family and your friends by surprise, and that's a great thing, because that lets them know that you're preparing, and that lets them know that when they show up, they should respect the preparation. Every Seder is different. Some of the things I will say today will be practical and applicable for some people. Some of the things I'll say won't be practical and applicable for some people, and vice versa. You'll be able to take what you feel you can incorporate into your family Seder. And some ideas may be obvious for some ideas may not be so obvious. But one thing I want to say is like this: there's no such thing as a perfect Seder. There's no such thing. We have this idea of this model Seder, of this perfect Seder that we're going to host or we're going to lead. There's no such thing. Because we know that the second the doors open and the guest comes in, there's so many different dynamics that we need to take into consideration. The age of the guests. Sometimes elderly need to leave early. Sometimes very young need to leave early, and things need to be quicker than we planned, slower than we planned. But one thing is, a Seder, really, what is a genuine Seder? If there's no perfect, and if there's no real model Seder, to me, a genuine Seder is people coming and connecting on a very genuine way. People connecting in a way which we don't normally connect, even on a family Shabbat dinner or even on a Chag dinner. Some of the goals for a Seder, for us personally, in Chabad Malvern, when we run our second night communal Seder, Ruvi and I put together 3 goals for ourselves. Goal number 1 is people should walk out and say, hey, that was fun. I'd like to do that again. I'm keen to do that again. Next year, when the email comes out, second Seder at Chabad Malvern, we'll come back. That's our goal, just, an overall positive experience. That was fun. Let's do that again. Our second goal, Ruvi and I have, is people shouldn't notice that they're hungry. That's a challenging one. But our third goal is a bit of a deeper goal, and that is something about the Seder should leave our guests to take some practical inspiration into their modern lives. And I'll explain. We normally see Jewish festivals as commemorations of historical events. That's how we normally see a Seder. So what are we celebrating on Passover? Thousands of years ago, the ancient Hebrews escaped from Egypt, and here we are 3,300 plus years later, we're celebrating that. What are we celebrating on Hanukkah? The Maccabees, right, defeating the strong and great Greek army and reinstituting the service in the temple. But ultimately, Jewish holidays are not historical commemorations. Jewish holidays are meant to be spiritually meaningful. And on Pesach, on the 15th of Sivan, 3,300 years ago, the mazel of freedom came into the world and took slaves and made them free. And for us as Jews, every year, we're not just commemorating what took place in the past, we're using this opportunity to tap into a mazel that re-enters in this world, the idea of a unique window of opportunity that God, so to speak, is giving us the ability to tap into personal freedom again. So when we talk about people like Parai, we're talking about a voice in our head that tells us, no, you can't. You're not capable of doing that. You're not good enough. When we talk about Egypt, we're not talking about a geographical space. We may even be talking about a self-created personal limitation, an addiction, an obsession, a limitation. In fact, the word in Hebrew for Mitzrayim, the root of the word for Egypt, for Mitzrayim, is meitzar, which means constraints, or a border, or a limit, or a stumbling block. So, in other words, the goal of our Seder is not necessarily to talk about the past, but really to try to engage the present and the future. It's for that reason, when Ruvi and I introduce our Seder here in Chabad Malvern in the second night, we say we're not going to be using bad words like thousands of years ago. Right? That's a bad word to use by the Seder. Or, dirty words like ancient Hebrews. Like, what does a teenager hear when he hears the word ancient Hebrews? It's just like he's back in school listening to a history lesson. It's not going to be very meaningful or inspiring. So our third goal, beyond giving people a positive experience that they want to come again and enjoy it, beyond kind of distracting people in a positive way that they shouldn't feel that they're hungry, but also that we're talking about the here and the now, and in some way, something about the Seder, something about the theme, something about the discussion, something about the family coming together in a genuine way can inspire us in our mundane, modern, day-to-day life. If there's any questions, by the way, please feel free to chime in. If there's any disagreements, feel free to chime in. And if there's anyone that has a personal experience that's positive, you can also share with us. I find, and maybe you'll agree with me, that there's generally, it's an overgeneralization, but generally there's two kinds of people that are sitting by the Seder table. There's the one that's in a rush, constantly looking at their watch, making faces, complaining from the moment they walk in. And then there's the other person that has this Hagaddah from 1906 that's a family treasure that was passed down from a grandparent and insists on reading every commentary and every part and is insisting that everyone read as well, and the English is quite archaic, but this is the Seder, we're going to pass it around, everyone's going to have a chance to read, and we're going to take as much time as we can until we've gotten through everything that needs to be read. But the reality is, if you're hosting the Seder, if you're running the Seder, if you're leading the Seder, you're the boss. And you have to create the vibe. You have to create the flow of the Seder. If you personally are bored, your guests and your family will be bored. If you personally are rushed, your guests and your families are going to be rushed. So the Seder should be a nice medium. Don't rush the Seder, but at the very same time, I think a wonderful idea is when your guests know that there's a plan. There's a plan. There's a running sheet. So for example, you'll excuse me, but I'm just using the personal experience. How we like to do it here is when Ruvi and I will introduce the second Seder, at night we'll say that Magid is going to take us this and this, right from the beginning. And we will be having dinner at 9:15. Like we will be like, so even if one of our guests feels like, oh, there's a bit of a commentary going on in the Hagaddah, and there's so many more pages that need to be, and they'll start getting worried, but we've let them know, we've calmed them, we've guaranteed our guests. We have a running sheet. There's a Seder here. And don't worry about it. We have a running sheet. It may feel like we're taking our time, but we have a plan, we have a destination, we have a running sheet. 9:15 will be dinner. And you have to keep up to it. You have to keep to it, obviously, if you guarantee it. So some ideas. Start on time. How can you start on time? What's the best way to start on time?
ASAP, when everyone's exactly the right time.
That's the problem, when everyone's there.
You can't start if one person is not there.
Right, you can't start if people aren't there. So what does it help? You've come to a class where I said, I'm going to give you some practical ideas to make a better Seder. So the rabbi told you a big chachma. Start on time. I didn't know. You didn't. I think it comes down to contacting people in advance and in all sincerity letting them know that you really want to start on time.
Or you tell them 15 minutes earlier.
Or you tell them 15 minutes earlier. I mean, again, you know the dynamics of your family and your guests better. But starting, when you're sending out a message to everyone on the family WhatsApp that we're going to be starting 8 o'clock, if you're leading the Seder, if you're responsible for this Seder, it would also be part of your responsibility then to call people individually and say, by the way, when we say 8 o'clock, we really mean it. We want to be sincere. We may have kids. We may have grandparents. We may have great-grandparents there. So starting on time in all, and you use these words, in all sincerity. You can use words like that. In all sincerity means that we're starting on time. Have the Seder completely set up. When I mean completely set up, I don't just mean that the Seder table itself needs to be completely set up. Even other things that need to be taken into consideration. The washing basins, the where you're going to be washing your hands, you're going to be washing clothes. Nothing kills the flow of a Seder when you've started on time, you've made Kiddush, the kid's already itching to say the Manishtana and begin, dipping everything everywhere. And now you're running around the house looking for the, what do we call them? In Yiddish we call it kvart, the Wasingbecher, South Africa. Nothing. So now everyone's waiting. You kind of lose that momentum. So when I say have everything ready, it's not just the Seder plates. It's not just the matzah. It's not just the wine. It's not just the glasses. But it's keep everything into consideration, whether it's hand towels, all those type of things, to make sure that when you start on time, which I hope you do, you then can move into a proper flow. So the key is thoughtful planning. What are some examples of planning? You may laugh. I take this one very seriously. No matter what age, never underestimate the magic of a pre-Seder nap. All right? Take it how you want it. If you're running the Seder, if you're leading the Seder, no one wants to be in the home of someone who's tired and grumpy. And nothing can ruin the atmosphere more than that. So no matter what age, never underestimate the power and the magic of a pre-Seder nap. If you're leading the Seder, very important, go through the Hagaddah beforehand. How uncomfortable and how embarrassing can it possibly be if you're running the Seder and a big chunk is going to be going through the Hagaddah and you're not even familiar yourself with the own Haggadahs that you have in your house? You wouldn't go to a presentation, maybe some do, if they do it often. But if you give a presentation one time a year, you wouldn't go through the presentation without maybe first looking through your slides. and having a look over your notes instead of standing before your audience red-faced and not necessarily knowing in which direction you're going. Have a look through your Haggadahs before the Seder starts. Have a read through beforehand. First of all, I'll tell you why that's going to happen, and this I'll discuss a bit more next week in the second session. This will help you know, in fact, and yeah, you heard it from me, what parts of the Haggadah you may skip. In other words, sometimes you have to be realistic and know that you will not be able to go through the entire Haggadah. And you have to know which parts you're going to focus on this year. You may want to focus on something you've never focused before, or you want to stick to the comfort zone, to the basics, to the 4 sons, to the Manishtana, to the Avadim Ayinu, to the 10 plagues. So going through the Haggadah will let you know personally in advance which part of the Haggadah you're actually going to focus on. And I'll elaborate on that concept a bit more once in our second section, where we actually look inside the Haggadah and become familiar with the Haggadah and empowered to properly run a Seder. Looking through the Haggadah beforehand will also let us know which parts of the Haggadah we want to do the activities that I'll mention before, or activities that you yourself, as your family has done in the past, or you plan on doing this year. So you can make a note for yourself at what point the activities will take place. It will help you make sure that you don't have to pack, you don't feel forced to pack too much into a Seder when realistically you won't be able to get through everything. I find that a few short discussions or activities in intervals during the Haggadah is much more effective than, say, 2 long ones. Small bursts of fun, small bursts of inspiration sprinkled out throughout the evening, whether it's during the meal or during the actual Haggadah part itself, will be more powerful than, say, 1 long discussion, or say a half hour of passing around the Haggadah and everyone, reading the English, which sometimes, when it's an old English print, is almost more difficult than reading from the Hebrew. All sensical so far? Common sense? Let's talk about some practical ideas. The more that your guests know of how you are invested in the evening, or how much you've invested in the evening, you will hope that the more that they will appreciate it and the more that they will enjoy it. Therefore, not necessarily that you need it, but in a way to get other people more involved, is to divide some tasks among some people. Now, everyone can think of examples for themselves. I don't know, the Goldstein family is in charge of bringing the charoset, and the Goldblum's family, they're the ones that are in charge of sharing specific things during the Magid, during the Haggadah part. I'll elaborate that in a moment. You're in charge of supplying the wine and the grape juice for the night. Your family's in charge of arranging the activities. You have to be specific. We want one activity where adults and children can be involved, and we don't want it to last more than 10 minutes. You're in charge of that activity. Let me know when you've done that. That lets people know that you're taking the night seriously, and that they are a necessary component to the night as well. So you're delegating. Number one, that not all the responsibility falls on yourself. There's a lot to do. Running a Seder is not easy. But also, you're letting people know, you're letting your family and your friends know how much is being invested in the night. A rabbi, when I was in San Francisco for Pesach one year, and we came there a bit early, and we were inviting people to our Seder, to the public Seder, either on the phone or by email or meeting people on the streets. So the rabbi overheard me speaking to someone, and I told someone, I said, if you have nowhere to go, come to Chabad. Come to us. We're going to be in the Fairmont Hotel, downtown San Francisco. You can't say no, right? So he said to us, he says, if you go over to someone and you say, if you have nowhere to go, come to us, then they'll come to the Seder and they won't go anywhere anyways. And your Seder won't go anywhere anyways. Tell them, listen, I want to invite you, whether you have anywhere to go or not. I want to invite you to the most wonderful, exciting, interactive, meaningful, inspiring Seder that you've ever been to in your life. It changes, it changes. So in other words, they're coming to your Seder is not it's not by default. It's not a second plan of, if I have nowhere to go, I'll see where I'll go. No. You're active, you're proactive, you're coming to us, and the reason why you're coming to us is not because you have nowhere to go, because this is the place to be. It'll be fun, it'll be delicious, it'll be meaningful, it'll be practical, it'll be inspiring, it'll be great. It'll be amazing. So, Cole, turn off the ear. Everyone okay, comfortable? So let's talk about some more practical ideas. We'll go through as many as we can. Starting the Seder, sometimes you will have that guests don't know each other. And you may not have the opportunity to everyone to meet beforehand and schmooze. Sometimes you may come in the Seder starting right away. You want to get started as soon as you can. So you may have people sitting by a Pesach Seder that are not familiar to each other, don't know each other. If that's the case, or even if you do have people that are familiar to each other, a good idea is an icebreaker. To start the Seder with an icebreaker. A nice, short, ice-breaking activity to begin the Seder with to help your guests to become acquainted or to get to know one another. Now, you don't need me to give you icebreaker ideas. Today, there's a rabbi that's far more knowledgeable than myself. It's Rabbi Google. And you can go onto Google and you can Google icebreaker game. And I guarantee you'll have 1,000 entries of ideas of icebreakers from complex, long to simple and easy. But your idea is you have to try to think how you can connect it to Pesach in some way. So cute icebreaker is something like if you can invite someone to history, right, from history, to come join our Seder table, who would it be? And then, if you want to keep up this conversation, something like during the Shulchan Aruch, during the festive meal, you can ask people to defend themselves and say, why would they have invited that person? You may be very surprised what the responses of people may say. You'll have from Moses to Nelson Mandela. You never know who people will come up with. And obviously there's going to be some personal reason why they're specifically inviting this person to the Seder. That's an idea of an icebreaker. There's so many other ideas, but that's a cute one. If you can invite someone from the past, distant past, or near distant past, to come sit down by the Seder table with us, who would it be? You can take it a step further by the meal, or even right then. If all these people were invited, would they all get together, or would every single individual that every single person invited create a World War III? Would they get along? But here's the thing, and this is difficult, and this is goes through everything I'll say today, especially when you're inviting other people in advance or on the spot to share. Encourage your guests to keep their answers short and concise. And sometimes that can be very uncomfortable. Sometimes that can be hard. But Pesach, you have a great opportunity because you can say, we'll continue this by the meal. Now, whether you do, whether you're not, I don't know what's going to happen. But the challenge is you don't want to get too carried away. You don't want to get too carried away. So you can always say, listen, let's keep this short. That has to be a notice in advance. Let's keep this short. Let's keep this concise. And if it does get carried away, you have to bring everyone back together, okay? And say, we can continue this maybe after we sing at the end, after Birkat Hamazon, or during the meal. Also, and I'll talk about this a bit more in next week's session, practical examples, how you can do it in the Hagaddah itself. There's a difference between speeches and something which I like to call sound bites or tidbits. If you're personally sharing your own commentary, if you're actually going through the Hagaddah, for example, and you're not just reading in English, you've actually prepared a commentary, an idea, right away, people can tell right away whether you're about to share, just from your tone of voice, from the first words you say, people will be able to tell if you're about to give a speech, or they will switch off, or if you're about to give a tidbit or a sound bite, and people will remain engaged. I have that challenge during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, for example, during davening, where I run a running commentary throughout the davening, trying to keep the davening as inspiring and practical as possible. And my challenge is to get up in front of 700 people and not to give a speech, literally to be sometimes in 30 seconds. So to condense my words and my thought. It's a very challenging thing where you need sentences, and really just to bring it down into one sentence, that's a challenge. But people really appreciate when your commentary, what you're saying is not a speech, but a tidbit or a soundbite. And you'll see, the second it goes into a speech, you lose people. The second it's a soundbite or a tidbit, people appreciate that, and that helps with the flow of the night. Now, an icebreaker is not always the best idea. You have to, know your crowd better. Sometimes an icebreaker is not the best thing to start a Seder with. You may lose your crowd in that kind of way instead of engaging them. It's obviously the decision that you have to make. So if you can't do an icebreaker, you can introduce all your guests. You can involve everyone to take part in this journey, to get involved in the evening, not to be spectators, but to be active participants. If it so happens to be that a regular Seder guest is no longer with us, if they've passed on, or if for whatever reason they're absent on the night, their absence is going to be felt. It's a great opportunity to acknowledge that person, and to acknowledge that person that's not present by the Seder with us that year that may have usually been present. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful way to honor someone that would have been present by many Seders, or maybe would have led many Seders that you attended, but is not present that year for whatever reason, to acknowledge that person before the Seder starts. You can do icebreakers in a game. If you look in the workbooks that I gave you, unfortunately, I could have printed a million things here. I could have done, this could have been very long. But if you go towards the end, you'll see the matzahs in the middle. So this just gives you an idea. This game is called Who Knows, I Know. So practically speaking, if I was to tell you how this game would be played, everyone would have something like this under their plate. They wouldn't even see. They wouldn't even know that they had it. So you want to do an icebreaker. So everyone's around the table. They think you're about to make Kiddush, and this real intense evening is about to begin. And instead of making Kiddush, you go under your plate and you take out a little matzah, and you encourage everyone. You say, by the way, everyone else has one of these little pieces of paper on their table. And you'll ask a question: why do we have 3 matzahs by the Seder table? Anyone can find the answer in one of these boxes?
Anyone? Oh, why do we have 3 matzahs?
Yeah, the answer is in one of these. What? Yeah. So Eugene, you would say something like, "I know." To show the unity of the Jewish people, they represent the 3 categories of Jewish people: Kohen, Levites, and Israelites, or to remind us that we were redeemed in the merit of our 3 forefathers. The English here is terrible. So then I have a question. They'll say, but who knows? Why do we drink 4 cups of wine? Can anyone find it? Mm-hmm. Yeah?
For expressions.
Eugene, you're the star student. You're the star student tonight.
On the roll.
One under. So whoever has that one, this card under their plate, will say, I know, to remind us of the 4 expressions Hashem used to describe the Exodus. I will take you out, save you, redeem you, take you as my chosen people. But who knows what is the meaning of the word Hagaddah, right? The translation is telling me to. You understand how this game goes? It goes, who knows, I know. Everyone ultimately will have a chance to answer, and once they answer, to ask a question. And if the cards are spaced out well under the plates, unlike how I did it here on the paper, one after the other, you'll find that it'll be going back and forth on the table. And by the way, this game is kid-friendly as well.
Very good.
Now, you don't have to use this game. You don't have to use it as an icebreaker. You can use it during the Hagaddah. First of all, it's an educational experience. People will learn some new things. Second of all, it could serve as something fun and icebreaker. Just an idea, something I wanted you to see, something you can create on your own with a computer and a printer and a scissor. Easy to be done. Ruvi and I have this game on a Shabbat version, on a Chabad Malvern, trivia. How many children do Shimshon and Rivka have? What's Velly's favorite food to prepare? Things like that, and it goes through. You can do it a family one. You can do it in your own way. Everyone gets a question and an answer, and it goes. Use this as a template. For the person that's in charge of leading the Seder, another practical but basic idea would be, you can't be in charge of the food and run the Seder. You can't do both. If it has to be two totally different domains run by two totally different people. Just something to keep in mind. You can't be worried if the chicken soup is hot yet, and if the rice is. Sorry, I said rice. You can worry, but you can't. You could worry, Eugene. We're all very good at that. We're good at the worrying, but it'll be difficult if you're jumping in and out from the dining room, from the table to the kitchen. So it's two different roles. Another thing I'd like to talk about, and this is an important one, which will really make the Seder special, is getting other people involved. So I know I've spoken to someone about how about getting other people involved. He says, of course I get other people involved. When we get to the Hagaddah, we pass around the Hagaddah, and everyone gets a chance to read in English. Okay. That's one way of getting people involved. Another way of getting people involved is what is called with advanced notice. There's a number of different ways how you can get people to prepare in advance, again, with advanced notice. And of course, what's the first thing you have to remind them when they're preparing from beforehand?
Short and concise.
Short and concise, with a limit, right? We're on a running sheet, so we want to engage people, so short and concise. One way you can do it is on a specific part of the Hagaddah text. It should be practical, meaningful, contemporary, modern. I'll give a lot more examples when we do the actual Hagaddah next week, but Avadim Hayinu, right? What's the translation of Avadim Hayinu? We were slaves. 2 years ago, in Chabad Malvern's public Seder, the person who we asked in advance to prepare 2 minutes on Avadim Hayinu, which is, by the way, probably the first time someone's going to share something, because it's Kiddush, washing your hands, dipping the vegetable, breaking the matzah, right? The four questions, the manishtana, and straight to Avadim Hayinu. Like Avadim Hayinu is the first thing that happens. So the person that we asked in advance to share a few minutes was someone that had just been in the midst of overcoming a serious drug and alcohol addiction. Now, I'm not talking about a junkie off the street. I'm talking about someone who was married, with children, had a successful business, and lost everything because of a serious drug and alcohol addiction. And when he got up to speak, he was something like 18 months clean. And he got up to speak, what does it mean to be a slave? Like, what does it mean to be a slave to your addictions? When he did that, when he started the Seder on that note, we didn't prep him that much. I said, I think, for you this will be a great part if you can talk about personally for a moment to get the night started. The night took on a whole nother meaning. Right from the get-go, people looked at Avadim Hayinu and said, this is real. Like, we just went from a pre-recorded interview to we just went live. Like right here, right now, we went live. This is what it means Avodah Ma'inu. Now, of course, it'll be hard for the average person to relate to a drug and an alcohol addiction, but with a little bit of self-awareness and self-inspection, we'll realize that we all have certain things that we're struggling to let go of, and we wish we could. And listening to some of that and taking some inspiration from the Pesach story can help us. So that's an example, an extreme example, but that's an example of asking someone beforehand to prepare something contemporary on a specific part of the Hagaddah. Here it was, I knew this person's story, I'm intimately involved with the person, and therefore I asked them to prepare something on Avadi Mayinu, and it worked. It was very, very powerful. To me, it was what a Seder is all about. Another way you can ask someone to prepare, if it's difficult to ask someone to prepare on a specific passage of the Hagaddah, you can have, general Hagaddah theme, a general concept in the Hagaddah, in the Magid itself. Something I was once asked. How many times is Moshe mentioned in the Hagaddah? Not trivia, not as a trivia style, as a great lesson. How many times is Moshe mentioned in the Hagaddah? He's not. In some versions of the Hagaddah, he's not mentioned. In some places, he's mentioned once, but as a byproduct. It says something, and they believed in God, and Moses, God's servant. First of all, it gives him the name servant. Doesn't call him the leader of the Jewish people, just calls him God's servant. And talking about God and Moses as this byproduct. Moses' name. A general Hagaddah theme. That's a great question. Why is Moses not there? What's going on? How? Imagine a story where the main character is not in the story. It actually doesn't make sense. I can't imagine it. Tony, what's the answer? Why is Moses not in the Hagaddah? Don't know. So that's your homework.
You can email it to us.
Okay, so if let's say to prepare on a specific passage of the Hagaddah is not practical. And let's say to prepare on a general theme of the Hagaddah is not practical. You can always find on a general Pesach or Jewish contemporary theme for someone to prepare. Questions, I gave you a bunch of ideas I found in your books there. Don't go through them now, right in the beginning. You don't have to go through them now, but you'll see. You can have a look at it later. You're welcome to take these home. But a question could be something like, in the age of modern technology, are we more free? Are we more enslaved than ever before? It's a great question. It's a question a lot of people are asking themselves today. It reminds me, I printed here for myself, it reminds me of a Shel Silverstein poem. It goes like this. I told my robot to do my bidding. He yawned and said, "You must be kidding." I told my robot to cook me a stew. He said, "I got better things to do." I told my robot to sweep my shack. He said, "You want me to strain my back?" I told my robot to answer the phone. He said, "I must make some calls of my own." I told my robot to brew me some tea. He said, "Why don't you make tea for me?" I told my robot to boil me an egg. He said, "First, let me hear you beg." I told my robot, "There's a song you can play me." He said, "How much are you going to pay me?" So I sold that robot because I never knew exactly who belonged to who. Right? That's the question. This poem is the question of today's day and age. With modern technology, are we more free or are we more enslaved than ever before?
Is that poem in our book?
No. you can Google Shel Silverstein. I think it's called The Robot. Anyways, it's a question.
Yeah.
It's an intriguing question. It's something that definitely people can discuss. You can invite someone before it. Another example. For Melbourne communities, sometimes this can be a bit much. It depends who you have in the crowd. Sometimes it could be a bit much. But questions like, is contemporary anti-Semitism or the memories of the Holocaust enough to motivate a Jewish community to live Jewishly? Can we rely that our motivation of living Jewishly as a response to the memories of the Holocaust, or as a response to battling modern-day contemporary anti-Semitism? Question. Once again, these are just examples I'm giving to make you think. Use these questions or use your own. Miracles. Do you believe in miracles? Do you even believe that historically the Pesach Seder, the story of the Exodus, historically, the capital H, actually even happened? Or, I don't know, the repetitive rhythms, nature, the repetitive rhythms of life that we take so for granted, are those miracles? Should we be stopping and paying more attention to those? You can do these type of questions. Once again, prepare people in advance to raise this question, to try to answer this question. Remember, they have to be what? Short, concise, to the point. A trick can be, by the way, that you can prepare two people with the same question and it can turn into a debate, a discussion. You may get two totally different responses. Ask two people to share the same thing when they don't know about it in advance. Another way to get people involved, ask someone to prepare to share a memorable Pesach experience. You'll be surprised about the places around the world where people have celebrated Seders, right? Anyone know where the largest Pesach Seder is every year?
Thailand.
In Nepal. It's a huge controversy because people were leaving Israel on Pesach to go take part of the Chabad Seder in Nepal. And some of the great politicians and pundits in Israel were questioning, like, what's going on here? We're leaving Israel to celebrate Pesach in Nepal? Is Pesach more inspiring outside of Israel and from all places? Not in Brooklyn, New York, and not in Los Angeles, in Kathmandu? I mean, you're closer, yeah. You'll be surprised where people have spent a Pesach and memories of a Pesach. Ask them to share quickly what that must have been like. And then again, something powerful, personal stories of freedom from a grandparent or a family member, someone to describe something. I mean, we had Rima once shared with us at our Pesach Seder here, by the Avadim Ayinu, you shared your story coming from the former Soviet Union, what that was like to go to Italy. Was it first to Italy and then to New Zealand, to Italy, Austria, and here, and it wasn't a very long speech. We printed it in our magazine at one point. It was just an amazing story, and people are there like, oh my God, she's in Shul every Shabbos. I speak with her. I see her. I never knew this. I never knew this story, this journey, this history, this experience, a modern day exile in our lifetime. Another suggestion, another example of getting someone in advance to prepare something for the Seder. It's a very good opportunity to get people who don't usually share personal stories to share. The advice is that people should be vulnerable. But this is what the Seder is all about. The whole Seder is Hagaddah lebincha, to speak to the next generation. That's the whole purpose of the Seder. I'll talk about this more next week, but if you were to ask me biblically, like if you had 15 minutes to run a Seder for whatever reason, like you only had 15 minutes, what should you do, right? I'd say, have some matzah and tell the story, like speak to the children. That's what it's all about. The whole purpose of the Seder is a response to the children. One day your children will ask, what is this all about? This is what you have to do. So if you're thinking of the Seder in that kind of way, it changes really what type of conversation you want to bring to the table. This is all about the Hagaddah lebincha, to give the message over to our children. We don't have this opportunity all the time. We have it twice a year. We have to make the most out of it. Again, encourage your guests to keep it concise and short what they're going to share. And again, don't be afraid to end the discussion. Don't be scared to end the discussion. It's your house. Obviously, it has to be done in a respectful kind of way. You don't want to embarrass people. You don't want to offend people. But the discussion can always be picked up again at the Magid. Another way of getting people involved in advance is you can actually divide the Hagaddah parts for different people. So, for example, you guys are in charge of the Manishtana, okay? Your family's in charge that when we get to Manishtana, you have the list, whether we're doing it oldest to youngest or youngest to oldest, you have the list, you're in charge of the Manishtana. That's your responsibility. When we get there, you'll be the one with the kids, getting them up on the chairs, however you want to run it, you're in charge of it. You're in charge from Avadim Ayinu until the fifth sons. That's you're in charge. You choose which parts you want to focus on. You choose what you want to give an inspiration on. Your job, you have the 10 plagues. You have Dayenu. You have this. This is your responsibility. Be short, be concise. This is what we're imagining for the Seder. Please, if you can come to the table, that's what you want to get. That's another idea of giving people in advance different responsibilities. Another way of doing it is by dividing up the actual night into different sections. Everyone with me on that? Comments, questions, disagreements? Okay. If there's children, a nice thing to do, and obviously not everyone this is within their comfort zone, not everyone thinks this is necessary, but try to get into the headspace of a child. Props and decorations. Props and decorations can really change the night and make it exciting and memorable. And it's something that can be delegated. If you're not really good at cutting out pyramids, or making a centerpiece that looks like a splitting C, or putting in the center of your table a black box that says high voltage, danger, do not open, you can delegate. You may have someone that actually will not say anything by the table, but they're really artistic, and they love a different way, a different avenue for them to get involved and participate. So you may have that artistic person, someone who can help out with this, and you can delegate it, or you yourself can be really good at it. Cardboard pyramids when people walk in, different things on the table in the theme. It makes it fun. It makes it more than just another festive meal. Leave some things on the table for when people's mind wanders. Pesach books for the children. I don't know, interesting articles for the adults. Here, every year before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Rivka and I put together our Meaningful Living booklet. We spend every year, as the year goes on, if we come across a great article, something that really moves us, whether it's about meaningful living, whether it's about prayer, whether it's about parenting, we have a folder where we save it. And then when the year comes to an end, we turn it into a booklet and we leave it on the tables, because we know people come to shul. They're not necessarily going to open a machzor. They're not necessarily going to daven or follow along, but sometimes it could be a few hours where they can just sit there. So have something interesting we create something interesting for them to read, and you're welcome to take one on your way out if you'd like. Games. Games are great because you're never too old to enjoy a good game that stretches the mind and entertains the heart. Games could be a lot of fun when they're done right, when it's planned properly. And the great things about a game is you can choose all through the night when you want to incorporate a game. Now, games can be from very, very kiddie to, if you don't have any kids and it's more of a mature crowd there, to in a more mature way. So when I say games, I don't necessarily mean games. I just mean more, games, but also like kind of involvement, people involvement. So for example, I put together tons of slavery and freedom quotes. If you look at the end of the books there, just as an example, some things I was able to. And by the way, if anyone wants me to email them, if they prefer it through email, just let me know. And everything I have here, I can email you on PDF or JPEG, which is better for you. Slavery quotes. You can use this by Avadim Ayinu. If it's not going to work to have someone share something personal and inspiring by Avadim Ayinu, or a great concept they found or researched, you can use this game. It's about slavery and freedom, so you can really use it any time. And you can find your own quotes if you want to find things that are more, I don't know, controversial or inspiring. This takes a little bit of preparation ahead because you have to print them out and you have to cut them. But I've supplied some examples that you can cut out or find them on Google. As easy as freedom, slavery quotes. You'll find hundreds. How to play. So many different ways to incorporate this game. Hand them out during Avodah Me'inu. Ask the guests to read their quote. Do they agree? Do they disagree? Why? It can be a surprise. Place them, each person gets one under their plate. Remember how we did the who knows but I know game? You can use it in that style, or you can use these. Put them under your plates. At some point in the middle of the Seder, no one's going to be ready for it. You can choose when you want. Everyone look under your plates, take out a card, and read your quote. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Alternatively, you can drag it out. Different people could read theirs as the night goes on. So this could be the whole theme of the night. Really, again, there's no limit as to how you want to incorporate this type of interactive idea. There's another cute game. I think you have the directions in this book. A grab bag. What's the connection? It's actually really great with kids because if you can get enough for each kid, they can actually keep them and take them home with them as a gift from the night. So you can play it anytime during the night. You have to prepare ahead, or it would be good to delegate to a guest to be in charge of it. You can do the whole bag at a time. You can do one bag at a time. You can do every now and then. And it would be something, you can do it in a bag, or you can do it like how I've prepared it here, right? So this could be on the table the whole night. No one's touched it. This was the last minute thing. So then, you can open it, right? And under you can have all your different grab bag ideas. What happens? Someone takes, and you can be really creative in what you want to put in there. And interesting items. They may have a connection to Pesach. They may not. Include some things that have no connection. Maybe include some things that have an obvious connection. Pass the bag around or have it on the table like I have it here, and a person has to pull something out and explain what its connection to Pesach may be. Okay, it may work for some people, it may not. I'll use this box for another thing you can use it for a bit later on. Another game. I gave you some examples on your book. Another game, and you'll see all these games that I'm saying are not Pesach games. They're games that are very popular, but you're just giving it a Pesach theme. Taboo. You can play it over dinner. You have to print ahead the taboo cards. So here you have them on your book as well, but here I cut them up, taboo cards. There's different ways how you can play this. Everyone can get a card, or you get one person. Now, let's see what this card is. Okay, so I got the card that I got. Says Manishtana, right? But the card that I got also says 4 questions, youngest, chametzu matzah, halayla hazeh, shebechol. You may want to tie me. You may give me 10 cards. I have to make you say the word manishtana, but I can't use any of these words, right? So I can say something. Well, it's easy. I say right away, it's asked. Can I say children? Yeah, it doesn't say. It's asked by children right in the beginning, right? So you'll say, Manishtana, and then I'll pick the next one. The next one is mor. I can't say horseradish bitter, roots, charoset, vegetable cry, or chazeret. So I want to say mor, It's the thing we eat in the Seder. It's not sweet. It's meant to make us, All right, so you say mor, bitter herbs, right? So you can everyone can get a card, or you can do a time, how many a person can get through in 1 minute, whatever. It's an example. Another example, if you're more of the studious and nerdy crowd, and less the playful crowd, matzah facts, right? Every time you eat matzah's eaten, you have another person create out a matzah fact. I've gone online, I've Googled matzah facts, okay? I found a sports hero named Isaac Matzah. New York track and field champ in the 1950s. Shmura matzah is made from grains that have been watched by a Jewish mashgiach from the moment of harvest to ensure that they never came in contact with a liquid that would lead to accidental leavening. The Manischewitz family sold the company in 1990 for $42.5 million. The brand is still the most popular type of matzah in the world. Dov Ber Manischewitz, his real name was Rabbi Abramson. Right? He was a rabbi from Lithuania who, to escape forced army conscription to the Russian army, bought the passport of a Jewish person who had passed away but hadn't recorded to the officials the death, bought the passport and came to Cincinnati, America. And his first Pesach as a rabbi, there was no matzah. It's not in there. I'm just giving an example. I Googled it. I Googled this. So you can do matzah facts. Every time there's matzah, someone else can read out a matzah fact to keep people inspired. There's some pretty interesting stuff out there. Another idea is general facts, right? I supplied those in your paper. Seder traditions from around the world. I supplied that. You can have a look. Some really fascinating stuff. Customs of Jews of Morocco, Turkey, Hungary, Iran, Syria, some fascinating stuff. Who knows? I know that I supplied. I gave you an example. You can play that as an icebreaker or throughout the night. And then, finally, this black box, danger, do not open. Like I said, it could be used as your grab bag, but it can also be used as something you open with the kids when you read the 10 plagues. It could be cute. And each thing, by the way, you can get a kit. If you go to any of the Jewish stores here in Melbourne, you can actually get a kit that you can fill the stuff in there, 10 things, whatever, whether it's little finger puppets or whatever. So it can be opened when you're reading the plagues. You can go to the dollar store if you want. I don't know, for Dum we have a red toothbrush. For Tzfardea we have plastic frogs. Kinim, a plastic flea or bug. Arev, wild plastic animals. Dever, domesticated plastic animals. Shchin, we have some body cream in there. Barot, foam balls. Arbe, we have a grasshopper. Choshech, sunglasses. Death of the firstborn, you have to be, I'll leave that to your, I'll leave it to your imagination or your rating level. When I did a traveling model matzah bakery in Northern California one year, so we were waiting for the oven to heat up, and we were in a reform temple, and the school was there. And my friend told me, he says, I need like 10 more minutes till the oven will get hot enough, so just, get the kids going. So I was discussing the Pesach story. I was going through the 10 plagues, and then like the rabbi came up to me right away. She whispered in my ear, she says, skip the death of the firstborn. It's not in our curriculum. So you have to be, it's everyone, it's to your discretion.
9 plagues?
What did I miss?
Death of the firstborn, but there were 9 plagues.
It's their curriculum. It's their curriculum. It's not mine. But, anyways, you can put in there whatever you'd like. So those are some ideas. I hope you can use some of this stuff. Actually, what I've given you, or be inspired of what was given to do your own work now. You still have some time till the Seder. But I'll conclude with one story that I heard. in Crown Heights in New York on Pesach, the Rebbe's custom was that he would go to Shul Pesach night. He would daven Ma'ariv, the nighttime prayer. And then there were a number of schools in Crown Heights. And the Rebbe that would host their Seders, because they were people that were coming from out of town, sometimes older people, sometimes people who had grown up not religious, but came and found their Judaism later in life. And the Rebbe would go visit those schools before their Seder to wish them a good Yom Tov, which was very uncommon. The Rebbe kind of was either at home or 770, but once a year he ventured down the streets of Crown Heights and went into the schools to wish everyone a good Yom Tov before they had their Seder. So a specific girls' seminary known as Mechon Chana, that year a young rabbi recently married with a young child who would later become the head Chabad rabbi of Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, St. Paul, he was running the Seder that year, Rabbi Feller, and he was there with his young son. So the Rebbe, he was going to be running the Seder for this girl's seminary together with his family. So the Rebbe came in, and the Rebbe wished everyone a good Yom Tov, and then as the Rebbe was going up the steps, leaving, he turned to the young boy, to Mendy Feller, and said, "Are you going to be asking the 4 questions tonight?" So the young boy said, "Yeah." So he turned to the young boy and says, "But does your father know the answers?" And everyone laughed. Everyone thought it was really cute. Does your father know the answers? The Rebbe kind of made the atmosphere a bit lighter. The next morning, Rabbi Feller says that he was in shul, and the Rebbe's secretary said, after davening, the Rebbe's secretary found him and said, "The Rebbe wants to see you in his office. He'd like to have a chat with you." So he was totally wasn't very often you'd be in shul and says, the Rebbe wants to see you. So he came upstairs and he went into the Rebbe's office, and the Rebbe told him, he said, "Last night, when I asked you if you knew the answers, I know everyone laughed, I know everyone thought it was a joke, but I was being very serious," the Rebbe said. The Rebbe explained like this. In other words, what the child, when Manishtana comes, really what the child is asking is, the real question is, not why is this night different than every other night, but why are we doing this night again? Didn't we do it last year? Right? We did this last year. We did this the year before. Why are we doing this again? The Rebbe said, that's really the child's question. Why do we have to do this again? We've done this before. And the Rebbe said, when I asked your son if your father knows the answer, he says, do you have the answers to explain to him how Exodus is an ongoing thing? It's necessarily an ongoing story. And do you have the words, the proper words to describe to your son why we need to be sitting by a Seder every year, based on what I said before? We're not commemorating a historical event. We're tapping into something essentially and necessarily very spiritually powerful. So that's really how we should be looking at the Seder. Even though we did it last year, this year is a whole nother year, and there's a whole nother pare we need to run away from, and there's a whole nother Egypt that's constraining us that we need to escape one. So thanks for joining me on this night. And like I said, next week what we'll do is we'll actually open up the Hagaddah, go through the Hagaddah, focus on what are parts that should be focused on, and yes, what are some of the parts, if you're going to be cutting down the night, what are some of the parts that technically can be skipped?
Spit out.
So if anyone has any questions or comments, but before you go, please, I'd like to give you a shmura matzah before you go tonight.
Velly, you mentioned Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Is that